Welcome, everybody, back to the Youch Films Podcast, the show where we kick back and talk with some of the animation and film industry's most interesting minds. We have a very interesting mind joining us today, folks. Joining me as well is fellow puppet enthusiast and voice acting enthusiast, Mike and James. How are you guys doing?
Howdy! Good to be back.
Not bad.
Awesome. Well, tonight on the show, we've got a really exciting guest joining us. He's worked with the Jim Henson Company for over 20 years and has performed Bear from Bear in the Big Blue House, Lionel from Between the Lions, Magellan from Eureka's Castle, as well as performing in Sesame Street, among various other great programs. This, of course, the person I'm talking about is Noel MacNeil. Noel, how are you?
Good. How are you guys tonight?
Terrific.
Good. And everybody out there, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
So just to cut to the chase, I suppose, we'll make this a general conversation, and this isn't going to be a standard, bullet point interview type thing, but
sure.
Let's talk about your early life and how you got interested in puppets. What was the first, I guess, television program where you were exposed to the Muppets or puppets in general?
Well, it's like, given how old I am, back when I was a kid, there was a lot more puppets on television. There was Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. There was Bird Tillstrom, who was a puppeteer. He did Kukla and Ollie for Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And there was Paul Winchell, and he had a syndicated show called Winchell Mahoney Time. By the way, here's a bit of puppet trivia. Did you know that Paul Winchell, the voice also of Tigger, do you know that Paul Winchell invented the artificial heart?
Get out of here.
Yeah, see? Puppetry can save lives.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
What?
Yes, exactly. So, and I had seen, marionette shows, and there was, the classic Bill Berry marionettes from The Sound of Music. But then when I was a kid, I was about 8 years old, and there was a half-hour show on my local PBS station, and it was talking about this brand new kid show that was coming on tomorrow morning, Monday morning. And it was hosted by two puppets. And these style of puppets I'd never seen before, because usually puppets were like the little puppets with like hard heads and like little fingers like that. And
yeah,
these guys could actually, the mouths could actually move, and they were soft looking. They weren't like hard paper mache or wood. Yeah. And one had his head was almost shaped like a football, and the other guy, his head was kind of pointy. It almost looked like a banana.
Oh boy!
And their names were Ernie and Bert. And they were talking about this brand new show tomorrow morning called Sesame Street. They showed clips of Sesame Street. You can actually go on YouTube. I actually think you can see this special. And I'd never seen puppets like that before. But what blew me away was Big Bird, because this was a puppet that could actually walk around. It wasn't hiding behind things. And that's the thing that Jim came up with, was the fact that before that, like, for instance, Bird Tillstrom and other puppeteers of his day, they would have this little puppet theater, and there would be like a screen separating their face from the camera, and then they would just put the puppets up in front of them, and they could see the puppets from this kind of angle.
Yeah.
But Jim was the first one to realize that your TV set is your puppet theater. So you could just hold up the puppet, and then he used the TV set as a way of seeing what you would see. And so when we puppeteer like that, we're actually not only acting, but also sort of directing ourselves, making sure we're in the frame, making sure other puppets can be seen. And it's also, the image is flipped. It's not a mirror image. So when your puppet is looking this way, on the TV set, it's looking this way.
Yeah.
And you just get used to it after a while. So then I started watching Sesame Street, and they did other primetime specials. They did one called The Great Santa Claus Switch. They did The Frog Prince. They did Hey Cinderella. They did The Bremen Town Musicians, which was my favorite. They did appearances on Ed Sullivan. They did specials with Julie Andrews. They did the whole circuit. And then they were on Saturday Night Live. And after that, that's when they got the Muppet Show. And I was a teen in high school, and I was watching the Muppet Show faithfully every week, Mondays at 7:30 here in New York. And as I became a senior and wanted to figure out where to go to college and what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a puppeteer, because Jim pretty much was making a career of this, and so were the people around him, so I thought I could do it too. So then I went and did research on this. Now, back then, there was no internet, there was no Google. You had to do it the old-fashioned way. You had to go to the library, which is like Barnes and Noble, but it's free. And I looked up stuff, and I looked up there were 2 colleges, and at the time, one college, which still is around and still offers it, is the University of Stores, Connecticut, has a 4-year puppetry program that you could study puppetry and get your master's degree in puppetry. And at that time, back then, there was, here in Brooklyn, there was Pratt Institute. And Pratt Institute had a theater department. And within the theater department was a puppetry course that was taught by one of the designers and builders for the Muppets. In fact, he designed and built Big Bird and Snuffy. And his name was Kermit Love. And no, the frog was not named after him. It's just one of those freaky little coincidences of life that this guy had the same name as the frog. Right. So I had these 2 colleges that I could apply for. Now, my mom was a single mom. She raised me and took care of her mom and her uncle and held down 2 jobs to send me to private school, because back in Central Harlem, there was a choice between going to the high school where the kid got stabbed or the other high school where the kid got shot. So she sent me downtown to Rhodes Prep School. And so I'm all set to present this to, the hardworking single mom. And I say, okay, Mom, I know what I want to be. I want to be a puppeteer.
Take it.
And she said, okay, what do we have to do? And I said, well, we've got this college and we got this college. And she said, okay, what do we have to do? And I said, well, this is due by this date. This is due by that date. And she said, okay, what else do we have to do? That's all she kept saying, guys, was what do we have to do? Because she told me a long time ago, she said, you can always get a job, get a career.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my God, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. So it really helped that she, supported my dream and helped make my dream come true. And my dream is continued now with the support of my wife, who is Susan Elia MacNeil, the author of the Maggie Hope Mysteries, available on Amazon.
Get it now.
Yeah, get it now. And so between those 2 people, that's why I am who I am career-wise today. So.
Well, no, that is. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm about to say, that's so cool that you have the support. That's amazing, because there's so many folks here today who, I was very lucky. I'm an animator, and I do a lot in the animation industry. I do voices and puppeteering. Right. So, when I told, and my dad is an electrical contractor. So all my life growing up, he saw me drawing, and he was like, I don't know. You ever heard of the starving artist? And as I grew up, he saw that it wasn't going away, and he was like, all right, well, this is what he's going to do. So let's help him. Let's make it happen. And
there you go.
It just, there's so many kids today who don't have that option or don't have supportive parents, but that's what they did back in the day. It was like, what do you want to do? I want to be a puppeteer. Okay, let's make it happen.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
I just lucked out having this woman who just was so supportive. And like I said, she told me, don't get a job, get a career. Her other philosophy was, it's only a problem if you make it a problem. So she just and she saw the benefits of believing in me, because she saw me. My first job out of college was being the wrangler on Sesame Street. The wrangler is the person who takes care of the puppets and preps them for camera. So before I was a puppeteer, I was the wrangler. And so she got to come and visit the set, and everybody loved her. And then I started doing background characters. Then we did the movie Follow That Bird. Sesame Street presents Follow That Bird. And we did it in Canada. So she came up and visited me. And she's actually in the movie. She has a little cameo.
Really?
Extra in the movie. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great movie. Actually still holds up today.
Oh, yeah. You better believe it. Yeah.
And the ending is great, because the whole premise of it is that there's this sort of do-gooder society called the Feathered Friends. And I'm actually the chairbird. There's this sort of flamingo character that has a turban. And so I got to actually puppeteer and do the voice for her. And they find that this case of Big Bird, he's all alone. There's no other birds on the street. So he needs to be with a bird family. Mm-hmm. And so the social worker takes him and puts him in a foster family called the Dodos in Ocean View, Illinois. And so the Big Bird doesn't like it there because when he wants Snuffy to visit, they say, no, you need to be with your own kind. You need to just be with birds. And he's like, no. And so he runs away and he runs back to Sesame Street. And after a series of stuff happening, he ends up on Sesame Street, but the social worker's there to take him back. And Maria says, no, he has a family here. So we have all kinds of people. They're not birds, but we have all kinds. We have humans and monsters and chickens. And what they do is they start to do this the camera starts to pan around. So you see this full 360 degree of all the people and puppets on Sesame Street that make up Big Bird's family. Now, when we shot that day, they didn't hire enough extras for this sweeping shot. So that's when they started calling people down from the offices, from the catering, from the carpentry shop. So it's really funny because not only we have all kinds, we have chickens, we have monsters, we have Noel's mother, we have Carol Finney's mother, we have Noel standing next to Bert and Ernie, we have the art director, we have the caterer, we have the carpenter, there's the gaff guy, there's the art director. It's just like everybody who pretty much helped make the movie got to be in this final shot, which was really cool as it turned out. So yeah, so it's and again, that's on YouTube. Everything I'm about to say is on YouTube. just check YouTube.
And for those in the future who don't know what YouTube is,
yes, it was this antiquated form where you actually had to sit and type what you wanted to look at.
It was terrible.
Yes.
Speaking of the Cheerbird scene, the Madam Cheerbird scene,
Yes.
If I'm right, I don't know if it directly opens the movie or it's like one of the early sequences in the movie. It's a really solid opening, and it kind of puts forward a lot of great stuff. For you have Miss Finch again, I believe, like the main advocate is like and I like that what they express in that is that it's this character isn't using the bad guy, but someone who has Big Bird's best interests at heart, and there's like kind of a sophisticated kind of conversation for kids.
Yeah, she's not really the villain. She thinks, and they think they're doing the right thing. It's just not the right thing for Big Bird. And it's the kind of thing where they're not listening to him or the people on Sesame Street. They're like, no, he is happy. He really is happy here. So, and yes, it does open the movie. It's right after Oscar's sequence in the beginning, which was the Grouch anthem, and the director Ken Kwapis was telling me about it. And we were shooting it today, and the announcer was supposed to say, "Everyone, please rise for the Grouch anthem." And I explained to Ken because he imagined like all these parents and kids like standing up, and I said, no, it's the Grouch anthem. It's like you would stand up, you'd sit down, you'd stay seated, and so they left that in, and so that's when. The announcer says, "Ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise for the Grouch anthem?" And Oscar pops up and says, "No. The Grouch anthem, you stay sitting down." And so they left it in, which was really fun. It was really flattering.
Just that. Go ahead.
It's not a written just saying.
Somebody talk.
I just love the immediacy of that cut at the end of that scene of like, where do you go to find Sesame Street? And then, of course, cut to.
Yeah, exactly that. Yes.
That's a good allegory for the foster system now that I think about it.
Curious to ask where Sesame Street is. Like
it seems to be the popular question.
Oh, yeah. Sesame Street, technically speaking, Sesame Street is in New York City. So our Sesame Street, the Sesame Street we grew up here, is in New York City. Now, Sesame Workshop has a division called Sesame International. So there are other Sesame Streets in other countries around the world, but they don't look like ours because they try to tailor it and custom it to that particular country and that particular culture. So for instance, in Mexico, it's Plaza Sesamo, and it's around sort of like a city square. In Germany, they have a neighborhood street that's called Sesamstrasse. And instead of a big, like so soft and cuddly, Sesamstrasse, and
everything German saying is so soft and cuddly.
Oh yes, exactly. It's like during the '80s, myself, Jim Krupa is one of my dearest friends, and Mark Milstein. We worked on the original Snuggle fabric softener commercials with the Snuggle teddy bear.
Right.
And so we would do the international versions, and so Jim would lip sync to the international. He didn't do the voice. He would lip sync to the American, and then they would also do the foreign versions.
Right.
And so in other countries, he was called, like in France, he was called, Cajuline. And Italy, he was called Topolino. In Japan, he was called Fafa. In Germany, he was called Kuschelwein.
So aggressive.
Doesn't that just scream softness, literally? Kuschelwein.
Well, for the Germans, yeah, they're soft. It's like a comforting nursery rhyme.
Kuschelwein. Yes. Yes. And so then going back to Sesame, so they tailor it to those particular countries. In fact, it's very often usually like sort of a street or a square, but two instances where it wasn't. One is Ireland. They wanted to have more of a magazine format, like it was almost like a 60 Minutes kind of format. So it's called Sesame Tree, and it's this tree, and underneath the tree lives this sort of like monster kind of character who is actually he has that phobia of open spaces. So, but he's curious about the world. But so he sends out like this little bird to go out and like do interviews with kids in the outside world based on the subject he's thinking of. And then when he thinks of it, he says, "Oh, I wonder how my friends back on America's Sesame Street would think about this." And he presses a button, and then you go to the library. That's the thing, that the library of Sesame Street is accessible to all these other countries if they want to. But in India, they don't use the library. They did one round of Sesame Street, and their Sesame Street is called the Gully Gully Zim Zim, which has the best opening of all the international versions. It's stunning. It's great. It's literally Bollywood. I'm not kidding. It's great.
Name like Gully Gully Zim Zim, you better. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's like, yes, there, when they rebooted it, they made it completely original content. So they have a street story with their characters from their street. Then the middle is an Elmo segment with the word of the day with their Elmo. And then at the end, there's a segment with Grover and his friend, who's a monkey, Toto, and they're out in the real world. And this is all done in Hindi. That's the other thing. They may have like an Elmo or a Grover or a Cookie Monster, but they're speaking that particular country's language because the puppeteers are from that country. So, yeah. The other original incarnation that just happened and is available, I think it's available on Netflix, is the Furchester. And the Furchester is, if you combine Sesame Street with Fawlty Towers, because the British love farce. And so their Sesame Street is a hotel, and all this stuff happens.
Sounds terrific.
Yeah.
So how many Sesame Streets have you visited, out of curiosity?
Let's see. I've gone to Mexico, Japan, Nigeria, South Africa, Palestine, Pakistan, Jordan, and
wow, you've been all over the world.
India. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's great because you meet all these different people and you really get a sense of their culture and how people live, and it's wonderful. It's such a great opportunity to see these people, especially going to the Middle East, like Palestine, and going to Asia, like Pakistan and India, was like extraordinary.
Wow, that's so cool. Now,
when I went to Palestine, they were rebooting their Sesame Street, and so they hired new writers, and there was this young writer who'd never written for puppets before, but I was working with the writers. I audition and train the puppeteers, but I also work with sometimes the writers about how to write for Sesame Street, and then the directors, like how to shoot the puppets. And so this young guy had a story idea, because I wanted people to come in and pitch story ideas that could potentially be used for the Palestinian Sesame Street. Yeah. So he pitched this idea where it's a split screen, and on one side of the screen is a puppet from their Sesame Street, and on the other side of the screen is a puppet from the Gaza Strip calling his friend on Sesame Street. And it's hard for the friend on Sesame Street to hear the friend from Gaza Strip because of all the shooting and bombing going on in the background.
Right.
And so the friend from Sesame Street wants to send a gift, so he sends up a Muppet dove with a little note, like a little note, a little heart, and sends it up to that side of the screen. A second later, on this side of the screen, you hear a gunshot, and feathers fall down onto the head of the character from the Gaza Strip. This is the story he was pitching.
Oh, God.
And through the translator, I said, "A world of no." I said, "I understand what you're trying to do, and I appreciate what you want to say, but this is not the way to say it."
You can't do that on Sesame Street.
But I wanted to show him how you could take that idea and make it more for Sesame Street, because Sesame Street, the whole point of it is like it's a haven. Like when the kids turn it on, Sesame Street is the place they can go to, and things will be okay. Even if something goes wrong, they know that people there will help each other. So we started working on the story, and it became where one of the human characters was sad because they hadn't heard from their friend in the Gaza Strip in such a long time, and they were getting worried. So the two Muppet characters, so they only have two hand puppet characters, wanted to cheer the human up. So they started doing all these silly things and finally dress up as clowns and try and do balloon animals, but they keep flying out of it. And then the adult starts laughing. So they say, "Oh, do we make you happy?" And they say, "A little, and you gave me this idea." So that's when you cut to them finishing a drawing of all three of them, and they've signed their names, and they roll it up, and the human ties it to one of the balloons that they had and lets it go, and the balloon sails up over the wall out of their Sesame Street towards where the Gaza Strip would be. And the writer said through the translator, "You watered it down." And through the translator, I said, "You're damn right I watered it down. It's Sesame Street."
Now, on the Muppet Show, that would fly, but not.
Well, yes, exactly. Because things just blow up all the time there. I mean, look at on YouTube. It's like there's this great bit from the Muppet Show. Ralph sings "The Cat Came Back," and at the end there's like this huge explosion where the entire house blows up, but the cat's still there.
And the rule of thumb is you can be as violent as you want so long as it's an over-the-top explosion. That seems to be kind of the rule of thumb.
Oh yeah. So or accidental violence. If a puppet does it by accident, it's okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Bunsen, Honeydew, and Beaker would be a perfect example of that. I think both of those.
Yeah, exactly. Just
as long as it doesn't have malice behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be mean about it. It's just an accident. So yeah.
So Noel, let's backtrack a little bit here. So where were you, and what was your first reaction to finding out that you would be on Sesame Street as a wrangler, helping all these great puppeteers?
What's your game show moment?
It was unbelievable that this show that I'd grown up with, and Kermit actually took us because I was part of his puppetry class, so we did a field trip to the set back when it was on 81st Street off Broadway. Then it got moved to 55th and 9th, and so he offered me the job because his assistant had quit and said, "Do you want to be my new assistant on Sesame Street?" So a microsecond later, I said yes, and so just walking in there was amazing, and I got to see all these people that I had grown up with, and I got to know these people. I got to know Roscoe Orman, who plays Gordon, and Sonia Manzano, who plays Maria, and Emilio Delgado, who is Luis, and all the cast members who are the nicest human beings you'd ever want to meet. Right. So and it was extraordinary, and I look back on it and as what a great opportunity, and it was also the glory of the 80s, because that was back when Sesame Street started filming or shooting its season in September, and it ran through till the beginning of March. So that was wonderful steady work for all those months. So and then we did the one special I worked on was called it's called Don't Eat the Pictures, and it's Sesame Street gets locked in the Museum of Modern Art overnight, and there were certain scenes we had to shoot overnight in the Museum of Modern Art. Oh no, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, not the Museum of Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And it can be really creepy at the Metropolitan at night with all the shadows and all that. And I remember there was one time, and that was also the summer where I was also working, I was also doing the Great Space Coaster. So I remember one time I had to my call time to work that night was 6 o'clock. And I finally got out at, 8 o'clock in the morning. We had wrapped. And then I just like straight from the museum went downtown and went to Space Coaster because I was due there by 9, and I just did like a full day of work there as a puppeteer. So,
Wow.
Which we shot at the Ed Sullivan Theater, which is where now David Letterman and now Stephen Colbert have the Late Show. So before them, there was puppets on that stage.
Phenomena. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you did Sesame Street, and then you did Follow That Bird. What was that like, getting word that you'd be working on this big major motion picture?
Yeah. Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. It was like first movie I'd ever worked on.
Yeah.
And it was also we were doing it in Canada. So
Really?
we actually, it was all shot in Canada, in Toronto, Canada. So I got to spend like 4 months in Canada, the summer of 1984.
Wow.
And it was great. And I had this great hotel room at the Royal York, which is like this grand old hotel right across the street from the train station. And Toronto's a beautiful city. I love Toronto.
Oh yeah,
it was great. And we got to go back in like 1987 because by that time I was puppeteering, and we got invited up to do the Muppets anniversary special, and it was shot in Toronto. And because all during that time, starting with Sesame Street Wrangling and then puppeteering, I got to actually watch and work with and get to know Jim Henson himself. So a lot of I just came from actually watching Jim and Frank and the other puppeteers, just watching them do what they do. And I learned all my body puppet tricks from watching Carol Spinney, who was Big Bird, and then also Marty Robinson, who's Snuffy.
Now, there's a story that Richard Hunt would get very sarcastic with you sometimes.
Yes.
What was that like having?
He was. Pretty much. Yeah, Richard was like. He had a really sharp kind of dry sense of humor, but one of the nicest guys I ever met. And whenever a kid came by the studio, like Richard would pretty much run over and get a puppet and just start talk with the kid and just entertain the kid. When he did the 25th anniversary special, there was like a whole bunch of kids in between, and they were like setting up the next shot. And there was a whole bunch of kids on the set because they were changing the camera angles and the lighting. And they didn't want the kids to leave; they just wanted the kids to stay there. So Richard just got a puppet and just started entertaining the kids with the puppet because that was Richard.
Yeah, they said that Rich was really, really great with kids. And I have a question. Yeah. So they've always said that the Muppet performers were really a family, like Jerry Nelson, Steve Whitmire, Frank Oz, Dave Goelz, Jim. I mean, and I'm assuming that you were a huge part of that family too, even though you were a wrangler and then you worked your way up to puppeteer. What was it like just getting to work with these amazing people that really created so many childhood and still today are creating memories for kids?
There's actually a great documentary I encourage you guys to go see. It's called Muppet Guys Talking.
Yeah, so
and so that gives you an idea of what it was like to not only work with Jim but also work with each other, because he just set up this whole tone, this whole atmosphere of like, let's have fun together.
Right.
And so pretty much like, working on Sesame Street and then doing like other projects with the Muppets, I just got to really be a part of this truly extraordinary time with this man. And so when I went off and did other stuff, especially after Jim died, just to continue that whole feeling of, let's all have fun together, which is why Bear in the Big Blue House is so special, because we just carried that sense of fun over, and just like we're just having fun, and you can see it, you can hear it in the performances that we do, and it was just like a joy to go to, because it's a puppet show. Like, don't get too serious, lighten up. It's like, it's a puppet show. It's fine.
I do have to say, like, there were a lot of puppet shows, and I was watching another interview that you were a part of not too long ago, There was a Legwa's Window. There was Gullah Gullah Island, but there was this one Nana La or La La Na, whatever it was. But Bear in the Big Blue House really stuck out as the definitive puppet show of the mid to late 90s. And I just, there was just something really, really special about it. I mean, just the cast, the characters, the performers, the writing. And as you guys really were, the anti-Barney, which was a breath to say the least. But so what was it?
Yeah.
Tell me your experience of like when you heard about this show and you were like, oh, Disney's making a show like Sesame Street. Like,
yeah. Well, it wasn't really like Sesame Street, but at that time, the Disney Channel was retooling itself and rebranding itself, and they wanted to create a block of shows. And at that time, it was going to be called Playhouse Disney. And so they were interested in having like original shows for kids.
Yeah.
And so that's when they went to the Jim Henson Company. Now, when Jim was alive, he made this deal with Michael Eisner. And when Jim died, they wanted to try and still do something with the Jim Henson Company. So there were 3 projects that came from this. The first one was dinosaurs.
Yep.
Right. The second one was a show called Alien in the Family.
Huh.
And the third show, instead of doing a show for network TV the way Dinosaurs and the Alien show was, they thought, okay, let's do this show for the new kid portion of Disney Channel. And so they hired Mitchell Kriegman, who came up with Closer Explains It All. And he went through the files to see, was there anything here at the Hensons that, never really got fully developed? And then there was this idea of like, this big bear. And so working with that came up with this whole concept of Bear, kind of, as one interviewer described him as a, Mr. Rogers in a fur coat.
I love that description, by the way.
Yeah, so it was like, and he was an adult character, and he had this home, and then he had these little friends who were representing the kids at home. And so when I heard about it, I actually went in on a Friday in March, and to audition in the morning for this sort of game show that they were developing, and with a puppet, with a giant kind of like alien-like puppet. And I was like, okay. And I came home, and then I got a phone call like around 4:30, asking, "Hey, Noel, could you come back? There's one more thing we want to audition you for." Yeah. And they faxed me, again, there's an antiquated word, faxed me the drawing and the sides for the audition. So in the cab, I lived on the Upper East Side at that time, and the Henson Company was on 69th Street. And so I just took the cab. And as I'm taking the cab down, I was like looking at this, going, oh, well, he's cute. It's like this bear character, these little critters. And when I walked in, Peter Van Roden, who now works for Universal and Warner and Universal Studios, he said, "Do your own voice." And I said, "What? We don't do that with the Muppets." And he said, "No, do your own voice," because they wanted a character that didn't have sort of a forced cartoony voice.
Yeah,
looking for a voice with character.
Yeah, so
like Barney.
Then,
yes,
yeah. Not to name names, but yes, it's like so. I got into like what's called the helix, like the understructure, and it was like this foam head, and it had the little monitor strapped, because that's how you do Big Bird and Bear. You have like a little TV set strapped to your chest.
Yeah, the electronic bra.
Yeah, exactly. And a little microphone. And I was like, as I'm inside him, it's like, wow, this would be really fun. And then I thought, wait a minute. It's after 5 o'clock. It's a Friday. I'm the last person. This is a courtesy call. It's like, you're not going to give this. You're not going to get this. So that's when I just didn't give Rizzo's butt anymore. And I just had fun. And just like, when, he was showing something, he would like look at it and like hold it right up to the camera. And then when it was time to sniff, that's when I just jammed the nose in and pulled it back out again. And just ran around and just had a great time. It was like, might as well have fun while I can. It's like, okay, thanks, bye. And then that Monday around 6 o'clock, that's when I got the call from Henson saying, "Congratulations, like you were Bear." And I was like, "What?" Yeah.
I mean, just going out and having fun actually worked? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But that's true.
Yeah.
Since you brought it up.
That same weekend, that Saturday, I went to a friend's a cappella competition over at Symphony Space, and a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, was getting people together, and he invited me, and we met at this Thai restaurant, and he invited a couple of people that I didn't know, but then he invited his friend Susan, who had just moved back to New York, who he knew in college. And so I went to the bathroom, and that's when Susan came in and saw all these people. And my friend Mike said, "Oh, Noel's in the bathroom. He'll be right back." Now, she had heard of me, but she had never seen me. But she heard about my exploits from Mike, about Noel's puppeteer, and he's been on this show and this show and this show. And so Susan had this already sort of preconceived notion of like, oh, a puppeteer, so he probably has some sort of facial hair, probably has a ponytail, probably has a shirt with some sort of beer advertisement on it. Right. And then I walked out, and we saw each other, and it was like instant, like, oh, hi, and made a point of sitting next to each other. Then we had a mutual friends engagement party the next day, and then I asked her for a number at the end of that. And so the next day was Monday when I got the call about Bear, and then I started dating her at the end of the week, and that was my wife. So that was like the most fortuitous 72 hours I've ever had in my life.
But what a couple of 3 days, let me tell you. I mean, that's just
exactly. So,
oh my gosh. Yep. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's like you never know like how like something can change your life, and so these were two things that completely changed my life forever.
I got nothing. I mean, that's just like whatever. I got to play the role of my life, and I met my wife. Are you kidding me? Like, okay.
Like,
so then,
I'm not done yet.
Oh,
there's more. There's more. There's a whole life coming up. There's more.
Woo!
And then, so just to jump back a little bit, I don't mean to change the conversation, but Bear is an awful lot like Magellan from Eureka's Castle in the sense that it's like the big bird technology,
right?
Except Eureka's Castle was not the Jim Henson Company, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon at that point was retooling itself and wanted to start like its own original programming.
Right.
And so they had this whole block of shows. It was called Pinwheel, and it was pretty much acquired shows from like Canada, but they wanted to do their own original kids show. So they took the profits off of the game show Double Dare, and from that created this show called Eureka's Castle, and they hired a company back then was called 3 Design Studio, and Jim Krupa was one of the partners, and the other 2 designers were John Orberg and Matt Stoddard, and they designed and built all the characters for Eureka's Castle.
I actually heard on a completely different tangent, but still related to Nickelodeon. I don't know if you knew this, but did you know that they actually used those Nickelodeon bumpers to introduce kids to doo-wop in the 80s?
No, I didn't know that.
Actually, I kid you not, I was reading an article on it not too long ago that I think it was like Fred Designs or whoever actually did those bumpers. They were talking about like how they were going to get kids invested in Nickelodeon, and one of the guys was like, let's use doo-wop. That's why we have the famous nick,
okay.
Because it was 30 years old at the time, oh my God, 30 years old, from the 50s. It was catchy. They could do multiple different, like dozens and dozens of different riffs, and creative with the animation. And I mean, to this day, I mean, you can't like think of Nickelodeon without that little jingle.
Yeah.
And it works.
Nickelodeon.
And then nostalgia was born.
Yes, exactly.
So
it burned in the memories of kids.
And that was because they wanted to reintroduce doo-wop, and it worked, by God, and fantastic.
Yeah, it was very, very clever on their part. So
it's the little things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things matter, fellas. The little things.
No, let me ask you something. Let me ask your experiences. You've really gotten around in your career here. So you've worked with Disney and the Jim Henson Company, Nickelodeon, and PBS, right?
Yes.
So
PBS, I also worked on a show called, in the early 90s, it was called Puzzle Place. And so I worked on a show called The Puzzle Place. And a lot of people don't remember The Puzzle Place because unlike Disney or Nickelodeon, where they had their shows on at specific times nationally, PBS, if you get a show, your local PBS station can air it anytime it wants to.
Right.
So there are some people who fondly remember The Puzzle Place and those characters, and there are people who have never heard of it because it was on while they were in school, or it was just not on when they happened to be home. So yeah,
like kids who were homesick got to enjoy you.
Oh
but,
yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
Well, they didn't know who the heck you were.
Yeah, yeah. And we shot that in Los Angeles, at KCET Los Angeles.
So do you just out of curiosity, because you're from New York, but and it's kind of like there's two central hubs today. There's New York, and then there's Hollywood, California.
Right.
I'm going to take a stab and say that you prefer New York. I mean, you if you can stay home, going out.
Yeah, I mean, certain places that are nice to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And so with LA, I always have a great time in LA, but I really like living in New York. So it's because I was born and raised here and know how to live here. But yeah. However, if you offered me a chance to live in Paris, well, I wouldn't say no. So I'd try it. Hey.
So there was oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask. We're going to transition back to Bear, but do you have something else you want to?
Well, while we're
the pizza arrived yet, guys?
Yeah, while we're kind of going a little bit around the various different studios here before we get back to the big kind of the bear of it all, let me ask you this: Eureka's Castle, what kind of jumped out at you about that show? What kind of sold you on that show? I could really do something with this character. What sold you?
It was really fun. I mean, there really was no hardline curriculum with Eureka's Castle. I mean, we occasionally would put in little maybe lessons, but it wasn't really curriculum driven the way Sesame Street is. It was just really just having fun with the characters, and like bits could be long or they could be little throwaways you could just throw in. And I got to, for the second season, I got to write for the show. So I wrote the scripts for Eureka's Castle because the head writer was named Jovial Bob Stein. You might know Bob Stein as R.L. Stein from all those books.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the same guy.
R.L. Stein, Eureka's Castle? Are you kidding me?
Yes, as Jovial.
You've made his millennia.
That was his writing credit. Jovial Bob Stein.
Wow.
I don't think he likes to bring that up too often because I've never heard that before.
I mean, if you did, he would. It's fine. It's he could afford not to, but it's yeah. I mean, it's it's just one of the things. That's when I first met him, and so
wow.
Yeah, and then I became a writer for the show. Because it's not easy writing for puppets. So It's the kind of thing where instead of say it, show it. So anytime you can actually have the puppet do something as opposed to saying it, really helps. So,
and then of course, is with Jim and Frank and all the classic guys. Improv comes into play a lot during, I'm sure, the Muppet Show, and just coming up with things on the spot, really funny one-liners.
Oh yeah, there's this bit again on YouTube. It's from the Muppet Show. It's called "The Comedian's a Bear," and it's with Kermit and Fozzie. And what happened was they rehearsed it once, and then they shot it, and that was it. They played it back. They looked at it. They laughed. It was yeah, it's good for me, and then just went on. So when you see that bit, that's the only take they did because it's just so perfect and priceless. The other thing is too, if you look back at the very first episodes of Sesame Street, Ernie and Bert, their puppeteering, the actual manipulation is really rough. It's not as polished
Because they're figuring it out.
As they figured it out. It's not as polished as it became by the time the Muppet Show came around. They had it down. But early then, it was really, really rough. But the characters of Ernie and Bert was so solid and so perfectly like done by Jim and Frank that you just excuse little things like that. So it's fine. And then you could just see like the relationship carried over into the Muppet Show with Kermit and Piggy and Kermit and Fozzie and Rolf and Sam and whenever they were together. And the same kind of relationship also exists between Richard Hunt and Jerry Nelson.
Oh yeah,
they were like best friends, and you could see when their characters were together. Like Floyd and Janet. Floyd was originally Jerry, and Janet was Richard, and you could just see the chemistry. And on Sesame Street, they got to be the two-headed monster, which was really funny. It was a character, this purple monster, and that had two heads, and it was Jerry and Richard together, and they were very funny. So
those guys, they're timeless. They really. So
yeah. And there's also, just to be fair, there's also really, really talented female puppeteers. Because whenever you think of Muppets, you always think of like the guys, but there are really talented women like Fran Brill and Pam Marciero and Stephanie DeBruzzo and Louise Gold and there was Kathy Mullen who worked on The Dark Crystal, and so there's a lot of talented women out there too.
Oh my God, no, of course. I mean,
yeah,
not discrediting them at all.
Yeah, no. Just to be fair, it's like when you say, like the guys, like it's like there's also really, really talented women out there too who contributed. Right. In fact, it's like one of Jim's first puppeteering partners was Jane.
Of course,
Jane is responsible for a lot of like what would eventually just be sort of a given with the Muppets. So so it was Jane was like the start of it.
And I love watching those older like Sam and Friends and like you said the Muppet fairy tales because there were so many really cool puppets. Like the beginning of the walk around puppet was the king, the Muppet King, and then like the witch, the prince into a frog. Like those were, and Sweetums was introduced.
That wasn't Richard. That was another puppeteer. So Richard didn't really do Sweetums until the Muppet Show. That became his character. But it was like somebody else. But it was like, and Sweetums, you don't have a monitor inside Sweetums. You actually have to like look through his mouth in order to see.
You would know this firsthand, right?
What?
I do. Yes. So it's like so I always like the big walk around guys. That's why. On Sesame, I got to be every Snuffle Upper relative that came through. I was Snuffy's mom, his dad, his grandma, his mailman, his personal trainer, Arnold Snuffleupager. And so, it's like the big guys. So if there's a chance of me sweating profusely and unnecessarily, I'm there.
So we've been talking about puppets for a really long time, and not that I don't love puppets, but it does kind of relate to animation. Yes. Have you ever been asked to do, performances like voice acting for animation? And would you ever consider it? Because it's, puppeteering is really a live action form of animation. But have you ever considered doing that? And if you have, what are some of the major differences besides just being in front of a microphone and having the puppet on your hand? Like, how do you separate the two?
Yeah, well, actually, when we did the last season of Trina Lions, they actually wanted to try an episode that was animated because in case there was a way of continuing the show, but as a cartoon. And so Pam Marciero and I, we did the voiceover for our characters, Lionel and Leona, but they were cartoons. And so that was the first time I ever did animation. But yes, I would love to do animated character voices. I have great respect for animated voiceover artists. In fact, I met two of them. I met Marty, who's the voice of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Oh,
and, yes, and the woman who's the voice of Poison Ivy from Batman the Animated Series.
Diane Pershins?
Yes, I met her. She was wonderful, and we did this Comic-Con in Atlantic City, and it was great. I was on a panel with them talking about voiceover acting, and character voices.
Because it's not just doing voices; it's becoming characters.
Yeah, exactly. It's acting. You're just acting with your voice, and being a puppeteer, I get to do the voice and do the character at the same time. And so
you were on a panel with Marty, right?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, that was at the most recent Comic-Con, right? The Atlantic City.
Yeah, the Atlantic City one at the Showboat. Yes.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
I stayed at the Showboat once.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I think. I actually got in contact with him right before he went to that convention about coming on here doing exactly what you are right now.
Oh, he would be a trip. Marty is great. He is funny and he has a lot of energy. So, yeah, make sure you eat before because you ask him a question, he will take off.
So speaking of becoming characters, let me ask you this: so we know how Bear works. We've kind of established it's a full body walk around character. Right. But how did the character come to life? I mean, how did you figure out? Because you kind of teased the whole. One of my favorite elements with Bear is the sniffing in the fourth wall.
Yeah.
So how does the rest of that kind of come into play? How do you figure that guy out?
Yeah, it was like I said, when that was one of the things from the audition they wanted to keep in was like Bear would just like jam his nose in the camera and like pull out. Because of the fact that, Bear would always talk to the kids at home, and also the parent, the caregiver, whoever was with the kid, because that was the whole point of Bear. They wanted to design Bear so that kids and their grown-up could sit together and watch the show, and spend time with Bear, and then afterwards, then maybe continue and spend time with each other, the way Bear was spending time with his little friends. And so with that, it was very interactive, Bear talking, but then like jamming the nose in and then pulling it out, and the sniffing was because it's like one of those little things that he's a 7-foot tall bear. He talks. He owns a home. He has a mortgage, but then there's this little like this quality that he has that he just can't control. Just like when he smells something really good, and it usually turns out to be you and whatever you happen to be doing at that moment. And I'm sure there were those moments when, if a kid happened to be eating pancakes or cereal or had just taken a bath or had just been outside and Bear smelled them and said, "Ooh, you smell like you've been outside." I bet the kid would just like either be so thrilled or freak out.
It's like that kid effect where watching something like Blue's Clues and then he's like or Door of the Explorer, like he's over there, turn around.
Mom, Bear's stalking me. What's going on?
Now speaking of kids being terrified, I was one of those children who was Luna unsettled me. To say the least.
Luna?
As well as
the moon unsettled you. We've got Shadow and the moon upset you.
No, that's the other thing. The Shadow, the Shadow. What was her name? And just Shadow.
Shadow.
Right? Shadow.
Not that hard. Not that hard.
You watched the show when you were a kid. What's the matter with you?
No,
Shadow, Mistress of Darkness. But we call her Shadow.
because Shadow and her little animated segments with these little shadow shows. Wow, those still they freak me out because you have these silhouettes just because when it reminds me a lot of this original Pixar short from the 80s called what was it, Red's Dream, where you have this clown
Lumpy,
against
Lumpy the clown.
Yeah, Lumpy. You have this Lumpy the clown against this solid black backdrop, and I don't know what that is for me at least, but just that black nothingness it just really freaks me out. Of course, not as much, not at all anymore, of course, but it's just that
you've learned to turn the light off at night to go to bed, so.
But so those are the shadow segments were really, I guess, different because it's a different form of puppetry. What went into creating those? I'm assuming that was a whole entire team.
It was one man. It was John Ludwig from Atlanta. He's a puppeteer, and his specialty is like shadow puppetry. And he would come up to New York, and he would go to the Henson studio, the Townhouse studio, and he would spend like a couple of days like doing filming shooting the shadow segments that would get inserted into the show. So he was responsible for that. Yeah, one guy.
And I think why Luna scared me so much as a little kid is because she's the moon, and the moon is something we were all exposed to at some point in life. Because I think just in knowing how big the moon is, just like looking up into the sky and seeing this massive face, it's just.
I love Luna. I don't know what you're talking about.
I love Luna now too.
I think you're thinking like the George Malise film. I think that's the one that should have scared you. That's
like what's into the eye. And
yeah.
Or is it the whole concept that Luna's always watching you?
Well, now that I think about it, yeah, that would be pretty scary as well, even as an adult.
Pull the blinds down, the moon's out. All
right, speaking of production, Noel, you know a lot about the production of this. So let me ask you this. How do you get to writing and directing?
Yes.
It's like once like when I'm in a show and I'll just usually by the second season, I'll ask can I write an episode? Can I be one of the writers? So that's what happened.
Let me direct or I quit.
Yes. Well, can I for Rika's Castle, Puzzle Place, and for Bear, I became a writer, and then with Bear, I also got to direct. In a way, I was like, I kind of always directed, especially the songs, like the dancing. I pretty much had free reign. I could just do whatever I wanted to, as long as it's like, where do you want them to end up? Or here. It's like, okay, great. So let's do, and I would just choreograph myself and work with the camera guys because we had the best crew, and as long as we ended up there. And so to officially direct, that's when they wrote a specific episode for the 4th season. It was called Volunteers of Woodland Valley. And it's the episode where Bear is supposed to have these volunteering duties, and he hurts his foot thanks to the otters who have left a skateboard out. And he slips and falls, and he hurt his foot, so he can't go. So then Pip and Pop and Trilo and Ojo go in his place to take care of these things. So Tutter, Pip, and Pop go to the library, do story time with these rambunctious bunnies, and Ojo and Trilo go to the fire station to help clean the truck, and then Bear's back at the house, and when they get back, they tell him all about it. So, but in order to write that, those had to be scenes where I couldn't be in it, because Bear is usually in 99.9% of the scenes. So it was just the scenes that were in, Bear would say, it's like, what do you think? And look at the camera, and then, take his hand and go, and cut.
Let me ask you this. Do you know what the origin was for the Barris Interruptus formula on the show?
Oh, that was the writers. The head writer was Andy Yerkes, and it just kind of him and Mitchell came up with it, and he just came up with the phrase Barris Interruptus, because Bear always has a plan, and it always gets interrupted because, again, reflecting real life, as a grown-up, if you have young kids in your home, you always have a plan, and it's always interrupted. And you just got to work around it until you can eventually, if ever, get back to the plan that you had set out to do. So, and then became this formula so that also the kids at home, which is why, if you watch the show, you knew the format would be Bear would open the door, he would welcome you in, he would usually maybe about to tell you what he was going to do, but then he would smell you and just saying what it was, and then he would proceed to tell you what he wanted to do, and then you get interrupted, then that would cue the word of the day, the subject, which would cue a song, and then he would say, what do you think? And that would go to the kids' interviews, and he'd come back, and then Bear would try again to do what he's trying to do, and he'd get interrupted again. And then it's okay, well, and then he'd hear the laughter. There'd be Shadow, do a Shadow story. Okay. And then finally after that, come back. Bear would try one more time and usually get it done somehow. And then that would wrap things up, and then head upstairs and talk to, I believe you called her the face in the sky. Is that how you phrased her?
Yes. I mean, no disrespect. I'm sorry.
Right, and then he would turn on sing the good night, the goodbye song, and turn on the light, and that's it. But there was that formula.
So there's obviously a lot of really great writing in this show that's targeted for the kids and the parents.
Yeah.
Did you do what Carol did and pasted it on the inside like the script origami?
Nope,
No?
there was no room, and so it's like I had to memorize everything. And
Oh my God!
yeah, and I called it a garbage memory. I got that phrase from Marty Robinson because Marty, when he does Snuffy, there's no room for him. I mean, there's room, but you really can't really like. There's no time because of what he has to do inside Snuffy. So he memorizes it, and he calls it garbage memory because as soon as that scene is done, you take it from your brain, you just throw it away, and you just move on to the next thing. So that's why people tell me sometimes these things that Bear had done. And I was like, oh, that's great. And I'm thinking, I have no memory whatsoever of what you're talking about because I would have done that scene and then just threw it away and like gone to the next one and just like memorize it and then go from there.
You know, that really does make sense as I think about it more and more. Because with Big Bird, you have the feathers, the yellow feathers, which make the entire interior glow. But in Bear, I'm sure it was completely pitch black, so you couldn't see it anyways.
Well, not pitch black, but it was dark. So it was just
pretty dark.
Yeah,
like in a burlap sack almost.
Yeah, it was like a very sort of muted copper kind of quality, so that you really couldn't like have time to read, and so and stuff I had to do. So it just frees me up too if I memorize it, because then I can add more stuff for me. So like ad libs some little things or just take my time. So it just frees me up to memorize.
Now, you have a son, and
yes.
So how first and foremost, how old is he? Is he still a little guy, or is he a little older? Or number two?
Yeah, he's currently 13, going on 42. So
okay, well then, never mind. I was about to say. Yeah. I'm sure. Like, did he grow up on Bear in the Big Blue House, or did you? Okay.
Oh no. He would watch Bear, and he had a big stuffed bear, and he was like, say, "Daddy, make Bear talk," and so I was like talk and all that. But it was like great when one time, because I had like the Bear toys, and there was like a speak and say, like the kind of thing where you would press a button and Bear would do the alphabet. He would sing the alphabet, and so as he's playing with it. And they're singing. I walk by, and I start singing too. It's like E F G H I J, and he says to me, "Daddy, no." What? And it's like no, sing. It's like you don't want me to sing? No. You just want to hear Bear sing. Yes. So you don't want to hear my voice singing, but you just want to hear Bear's voice singing. Yes. Okay. So then, by the time he was like, I guess like 7 years old, because by that time he knew what a puppeteer was, and I explained to him, well, puppeteers help the puppets. Like my friend Carol helps Big Bird, my friend Eric helps Grover, and so
like personal assistants.
Yeah, it's like, and you've been to the set of Between the Lions, and so he knew that I helped Lionel. So then finally, when he was around 7, he said, "Dad, who helped Bear?" And I said, "Do you really want to know?"
Right.
He's like, "Yes." And I said, "Me." And he went, and I said, "Haven't you ever noticed how my voice and Bear's voice kind of sound the same?"
Just a little bit.
Right. And he did this. Oh yeah. And that's how he found out.
That's
delightful. That's a keeper.
So nothing too traumatically blown away. Just like figured it out. I was like, oh yeah. It's like, yep, that's it. So
next day at school, dude, my dad's Bear. I was like, no joke, it's true. Like, here, listen.
It has to be like the revelation of a lifetime, right there.
Right.
It's much cooler if your dad's Wolverine. Really, it's like
or Winnie the Pooh. Which
yes, yeah.
But if those kids sneak a peek at Logan, they're gonna have therapy. They're gonna have issues.
Actually, I was doing a Bear appearance out in LA, and I had my backpack actually had like it was a gift one year, and it had the logo on it. And as I'm waiting to get off, this guy behind me said, "Excuse me." And I turn around, and he said, "Do you work on the show?" And I said, "Yeah." And I started talking with him, and it was actor James Marsden, who played Cyclops in the X-Men movie. And he would tell me how he and Hugh Jackman, because Hugh has at that time his son was little, and I got a request from Henson to do an autograph of Bear for his son, and so James said that he and Hugh would be in the makeup chairs, for X-Men, and while they're in the makeup chairs, like getting made up, they would sing Bear songs. So I said to him, I could just imagine, Wolverine singing "What's That Smell?"
Right.
Of course, with the super smell and the super senses make perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. So it really made my day that the X-Men was singing Bear songs.
That's fantastic.
Well, I don't think Wolverine or any of the X-Men have touched nearly as many hearts in the way that Bear has, though. I think.
Well, Wolverine has, but an unconventional way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
so it's like usually rips his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Blue House.
Yeah. Yeah.
On a more positive note, Bear was 1997, right?
He debuted in October of 1997. So last October was the 20th anniversary.
Wow.
Wow.
I guess
we had a screening at in Queens here. There's a great museum, the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, and they had a screening of the Christmas special that we did, the 2 parts Christmas special of Bear, and to commemorate the anniversary. And myself and Tyler Bunch, who was one of the puppeteers on the show, he played Pop, and he played Trilo, and he played Doc Ock. And we were talking about the episode. The moderator, the host, Craig Shemin, who's sort of the historian for the Muppets. He wrote this great book for DK, and it was about pretty much the Muppets. And he's with the Muppet. He's with the legacy, the Jim Henson legacy. And so, in fact, this coming June 30th, 2018, at the Museum of the Moving Image, I'm hosting 2 episodes of Bear. One of the episodes I wrote and the one I directed. And then after that, I'm going to be hosting a puppeteering workshop for families. And
What's the date on this?
June 30th.
June 30th. Okay.
June 30th. In Queens, New York, at the Museum of the Moving Image. Right across from Kaufman Studios, where they shoot Sesame Street. So, yes,
Wow.
Museum of the Moving Image. And that's where they also have the permanent Jim Henson collection.
That's right.
So it's a great exhibit.
And
I want to go see that so badly.
There's actually a traveling one extension of it. It was in Seattle. It was just in Los Angeles. So you should check. Go to the Museum of the Moving Image website and see where it's appearing, because it might be coming to a city near you.
And it's. I'm thinking back on this because last October, I was deciding where to go on vacation, because it was originally going to be in New York, but then the last moment I decided to go to Disneyland instead.
Well, there you go.
It was right in October.
To be fair, both places have interesting characters. Disney has a little less smells, so good choice.
Yeah, I think so too.
Next time I consider going to New York on a pretty big decision like that, I think I'm just going to go with my gut and just because I would have been there right when that Big Bear
Breathe
I'm
in.
getting Big Bird and Bear mixed up in the same sentence here.
I
when
love
this whole anniversary was.
He's been called Big Bear, Blue Bear. It's like, it's fine. We get it. So it's like, yeah.
Blue Big Bear, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So it's going to be on June 30th. The Museum of the Moving Image, which is a great museum in itself. So
that's great.
Speaking of Disney, I'm sorry, I was going to.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of Disney, so I'm dying to know, Noel, this is a big one for me here. Tell us about the live show, because here's the thing: I at Walt Disney World, I took in the show back when it was going on. So, how exactly does that work? That's the thing. I've heard you speak about this a little bit. I mean, so it was at Disney World, and I think it was at California Adventure, and so were you there sometimes, or how's that whole thing work?
It first started at Disney World. Actually, once when the show was really successful, there was talk about maybe doing an attraction or something at Disney World, and so I would usually go down every New Year's with my family. Yeah. So I went to Peter Van Roden, who at the time still worked at Disney. I said at Henson, I said, "Look, I'm going to be down for New Year's. If you want to send Andrea Detweiler, who was my wrangler then, and Bear, I can do a little appearance in the park." and we'll see like if there's any what the reaction would be. And he was like, really? On your vacation? I was like, yeah, sure. Let's try it. So they sent him down and sent Andrea down. And it was decided that it would be best for Bear to be in at that time it was called the Disney MGM Studios. Now it's the Hollywood Studios. But they thought it
It'll
would
always
just
be
better.
MGM to me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. And so they thought it would make more sense to have it in the studios. So then Bear got ready, and I went out, and I stood just to the side of the Chinese theater. And all of a sudden, people looked over and saw Bear and just ran over and started saying, like, hi, Bear. And, of course, Bear answered back, hi, how are you? And just, like, started talking. This Disney person comes running over and sees what's happening and leans in. I mean, at this point, Bear's not even in the park yet. I mean, there's no representation whatsoever. Yet this Disney person still leaned in and said, "You're not supposed to talk." and Bear's, you can't talk. And Bear turned and said, "Yes, I can."
What are you talking about?
It's like, no, you really can't talk. It's like, yes, I can. Watch me. Hi, how are you? I just like ignored the person and just went back. And so that's when the Henson people came and said, this really is Bear. This is the Bear from the show. So it's okay. So it's fine.
Right.
Yeah. So it's good. It's all good.
And that was just for one day, right?
Yeah, it was just like just one day, and that was it. And it was it turned out really rough. It turned out really well. So it was great. So
and you think about it, because how many Disney walk around characters have the ability to move their mouths? I mean, with Bear, he's a puppet. You don't really get, there aren't really any walk around characters at all in the Disney parks like Bear. So it's kind of like a just sit there and think about it, and you'll realize that this is, if you've seen the show, this sounds like Bear. He's moving his mouth.
Exactly. He's moving his mouth and just like, yeah, and that's the thing. It was just like, it was actually Bear. It was actually him. And so that's why people were like so thrilled. And so then that's when a tour like a mall show was created. And the mall show was a way to see how popular the show could be in terms of becoming like a V Corp show. And so it was so popular, that's when Disney just bought the whole thing, and just lock, stock, and barrel, and just bought the whole thing and put it into the soundstage, and it was Bear in the Big Blue House Live. And it was so popular that they just decided then, you know what? We have all these other shows that could also use the exposure. Why don't we, put them in with Bear? So Bear became like the bookends for these other tales of Playhouse Disney, and that's how it became Playhouse Disney Live. And then that's when they opened that version out in California. So for the original Disney World show, I went down and worked with the puppeteers, especially the Bear puppeteers, and showing them like how the characters would move and how Bear would move. And so, like Bear would always squat down. He would never kneel down. He would always like squat down, like on his haunches.
So you taught him how it was done. Okay.
Yeah, and just so that it remained consistent with the show. So yeah,
that's terrific.
Nice.
And then now I don't mean to change the subject too drastically here, but another show you did, or two other shows you did, that became popular for different reasons in the early 2000s, Between the Lions and Ubi.
Yes.
Two shows that I
Between
personally
the Lions is awesome, man. It really is.
It really is. Ubi's
special. Just say it. Ubi's
special. Ubi is special. But I have very vivid memories of watching Ubi and just trying to figure out what was going on. And
I always part of my puppetry workshop demonstration is that Ubi was, a pair of glass eyeballs on our bare hands. Like that was the puppet. That's why I say that puppets don't have to be incredibly overly complicated. Like a puppet could just be a bunch of eyes, a pair of eyes on your hand. Like that's it. And if you're lucky, they will pay you to actually do this. So that's what was Ubi. And Ubi, the characters only talked in one or two words at a time.
Yeah. And then I think for me as a little kid, just knowing that okay, everybody has hands. These
Right.
hands are by themselves on this screen. What are these hands attached to? Like the characters, like do they have legs? How does that work? Do they have arms?
Yeah, there was always that sort of question. Especially there was like one little like throwaway where Keiko was in the bathroom and kind of like sitting on the toilet. But it was like, yeah, we always wondered like what's going on with these characters. And then they met like another character who was a foot. It was a foot that had eyes, so you had to lay on your back and put your foot up. And then there was their friend Angus, whose eyes were like inside his mouth, and so we kept kidding that he was Canadian.
God. It sounds a lot like Hand
Yeah,
Man.
but then we always that question of like, where are their legs? What's going on? And yes, and like the lack of clothing, and I don't understand this. Yes, it was like yeah, and all the animals too were also our hands, and we would like do like animal like a fish. I did a fish one time, and they put like eyes and makeup on my hands to look like scales, and just flapped my hand on the deck, and that's when Ubi like throws the fish back because he wants the fish to be okay. But yeah, it was a great show and an odd show at the same time.
So then Between the Lines was a little bit more regular, let's just say.
It's a real charming idea.
Yeah, it was like a newer version. It was like an all puppet new version of like the Electric Company, because pretty much it was teaching, phonics. And, and so it was more of a traditional kind of show, and it was also written by, it was created by Michael Frith and Norman Stiles and Chris Surf, who both worked on Sesame Street. So you had that great sort of Sesame sensibility where it's got to be funny first, and then we're teaching the lesson within that. So.
It was a show about words and the public library and everything. It was all about just kind of took those lions outside that I think it was like set up the New York Public Library, right?
It was supposed to be. It reflected the New York Public Library in terms of like the lions, like out front, and so when you go inside, you're going between the lions.
Yeah.
Into the library. So, and the first set was this glorious like 2-story set, and in the same studio upstairs in Kaufman where they shot Bear, and where they now shoot Sesame Street, and where we shot Ubi. So that studio seen many a puppet show. And when we did this, the last 2 seasons, we did them in Jackson, Mississippi with a smaller set. Mm-hmm. And because Jackson became, the public television became a partner because to help their illiteracy program, and not so much for kids, but for adults. So that's why they contributed to the last 2 seasons of Lions, and that's why we shot it there, which was great. Jackson, Mississippi is a great city. It's awesome.
And then you guys would also do you'd take turns touring to different places and doing shows like that.
Yeah,
right?
live shows. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, and I got to go to Portland, Oregon, and Seattle during that last year.
Wow.
And it was really fun. It was really good. Seattle has a great children's museum, like a science children's museum, and Portland has one of the most beautiful zoos I've ever been to. It's like built like on the side of hills, and it's just gorgeous. It's great.
Wow. So that was perfect for Lionel, I'm sure. So Bear's going on, and you get involved with Ubi, which is I'm assuming was very easy job. And then Between the Lines, all these shows, at least Between the Lines and Bear, I'm not sure how much of a hit Ubi was, but Between the Lines and Bear really took off. Of course, Between the Lines that ran until 2010, right?
I think so. Yeah, it was in repeats, and then they repeated it for 2 more seasons, and then the funding ran out to even repeat it, so that's why it's no longer on the air. But it's still part of PBS's website. The last time I checked, so you could still look up videos and games on the website on pbskids.org.
That's terrific.
Speaking of PBS, is it true that you wrote some episodes of Cyber Chase?
I did. I definitely wrote one episode of Cyber Chase way back when it was first starting out, and it was about the concept of symmetry, and I wrote an episode for that.
Wow,
that's a good one. Yeah, I remember my favorite episode of Cyber Chase. It's the donut episode. It's the basically kind of teaches kind of how money works. It's really
I actually got to write I got to write episodes for the last season of The Magic School Bus, which was really fun.
Ooh.
Yeah, I wrote the episode about the life cycle of a star, and then the other one about wild animals that have to adapt to living in the city. And they were fun. They were good. They're on. I believe they're on. Yeah, they're still on Netflix. And with the favorite of the two is the Star Show, because the kids try to get a present for their friend who's homesick, and so they want to buy a star, and so they go to the Star Shopping Network, and the host is Horace Cope, and he is the voice of Dabney Coleman. And if you remember, Dabney Coleman was the villainous boss in the movie 9 to 5, which starred Lily Tomlin, who plays Miss Frizzle.
Oh my God, that's
it's a weird movie, Inception. I love it.
Speaking of voices, what was it like writing for Christopher Lloyd? That has to have been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it was fun just thinking, because he's being such the villain, so you always have more fun with like writing the villain lines. I remember when I was writing for The Magic School Bus, I remember even though like two of the kids were the primary kids in the story, you had to give every kid at least one line, just so that the kids at home remembered that they existed. So
Matt has a line, Inez has a line, and Jeff has a line.
One of them has like Carlos has to do a corny pun, and somebody, Dorothy had is like, in my old school we used to and Arnold has to be fretting about something, but everybody had to have at least one line, even though they're not really central to this episode.
Oh, sorry about that.
Well, no, what'd you say, Mike? It was a little bit muffled.
That was not me, so don't worry about it.
Okay. Is that a cue to wrap things up? Is your tummy like getting upset?
Apparently, Mike's little joke here is trying to scare off our guest, so thanks for that, Mike.
I actually did want to ask about Lynn Thigpen, who, of course, was Luna. And
the face in the sky, yes.
Yes. She was a Chicago native. She was from Joliet, which is not too far from my hometown. And I wanted to ask, did you get the opportunity to record face-to-face with her, or did you get to obviously meet her? I mean, what was it like working with her?
When we did the Bear and Luna conversations, I would go to a studio, the Sony studios that used to be here in New York, and we would sit and we would record our conversations as Bear and Luna. And then when she got this primetime show with Craig T. Nelson called The District, she lived out in LA. So then I would go and then we would do our conversations over the phone, but they would record her in LA and they record me here in New York. And so it was great. But what's funny is before Lynn and I had our conversations as Bear and Luna, we had a conversation as two other characters on Puzzle Place. I wrote an episode for Puzzle Place where my character Leon wants to be like Sherlock Holmes, but Ben, who's his Watson, keeps finding everything, and so Leon gets flustered because his ego's bruised and gets fired. So then he can't solve the mystery, so he decides to ask an expert. So they had this big computer kind of screen. It was called the Weebus, and it was kind of like this glorified, video phone. And so he went up there and said, "Weebus, please call the chief of the Acme Detective Agency." And when the screen pops on, there's Lynn in her character from the game show, the PBS game show, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And so they shot her piece in New York and they shot mine in LA. But technically, that's the first time we ever spoke as characters. And then Bear and Moon and Luna continued that. And I suggested that she be the voice of Luna, and she was perfect. And I also got the name because Mitchell asked me what would be a good name for the moon, and I said, "How about Luna?" And so we went with that. And then when it was time to name the sun, he said, "What would be a good?" He just came to me just before we came back from lunch. Said, "What's a good name for the sun?" And it just popped in my head. I said, "Ray."
Well, Michelle, for sure.
And I
against the wall. All the best stuff comes up.
Yeah, just like right on the spot. So
No,
I think Dragon got a little bit excited when he heard Craig T. Nelson there.
I
He also
Yes,
voiced
The Incredibles in theaters now.
exactly.
yeah. No, I heard a really, really. I don't know if this is true, but I mean, after she passed away, it was had the show wrapped at that point, or were you just about to like finish the show?
The show had wrapped. Just like Lynn's death had nothing to do with the ending of the series. Like we had wrapped the series, and then about a year after that, that's when Lynn passed away very suddenly.
Right.
And so, but her death had nothing to do with wrapping up the show at all. So
that's good to know, because I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because that's
Actually, at her memorial service, people got up and they showed different scenes of things she had worked on. I was the last speaker, and we used the last scene of the last episode to wrap things up. And it was the conversation that Bear has. The show was about being appreciated, and Bear wins this contest, and he gets to take all of his friends to this sort of like woodland lodge. And they're all tucked in bed, and there's a balcony. He wonders, and he walks down to the balcony, and he looks up in the sky, and Luna looks down and says, "Bear, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Luna." Yeah, and so they talk, and he says that, my friends thought I was leaving, but I actually won a trip and brought them, but they made me feel so appreciated. And she says, "Yes, wouldn't it be nice if we could all, help somebody feel appreciated, each day?" And that's when they sing, could we sing the goodbye song one more time? And of course, at this point, there's not a dry eye in the house. So,
right, of course.
So so I got to be the last speaker. But no, Lynn's death had nothing to do with wrapping the series. It was all wrapped up.
Now, do you remember the words to the goodbye song?
Kinda, yeah.
Yes. So we're quickly approaching.
We're wrapping it up now. That's a good segue. Usually people say, "Would you like some coffee before you go?"
We have pizza coming from Domino.
That's a good segue. We can wrap it. We can all sing the goodbye song. This is great.
No, I was actually gonna bring up Breakfast with Bear, which only ran for about a year, right? So
yeah, it did. Yeah.
And then you were still doing Between the Lines till 2010, and that was in 2007, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, and then So yes, it was like a busy time for puppets, and so, but yeah, it was Between the Lines was fun, and Breakfast with Bear was great because you actually got Bear to go into the real world.
I love seeing him interact with kids. That was really good.
Yeah, and in their actual homes, which aren't designed for 7-foot tall bears.
Not normally.
Doors are really, really skinny. So,
so what are you doing nowadays? What do you have in the pipeline, if you're allowed to talk about it? I mean,
oh sure. I mean, next month I'm going with the Muppets to redo. We did a show in the Hollywood Bowl last year. It was pretty much the Muppet Show live. And so we're doing the same show, just tweaked, and it's going to be next month in London. And it's called The Muppets Take the O2, and it's Friday, July 13th, and Saturday, July 14th.
Are you allowed to say what
again,
character you're performing?
I get to be Sweetums again.
Oh,
there we go.
And Barbie Moynihan, who was there last time, also gets to be there again. And we have a few special British guest surprises, which I'm not allowed to say, but they are awesome.
legendary, one might say.
Yeah. And then every now and then, I will get the phone call from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver.
Nice.
Go on and play something silly, like my most recent incarnation was a giant talking squirrel named Mr. Nutterbutter.
Hey, did you do the prison song on John Oliver? Because I really love that segment. You did?
Yes,
Who were you?
I was the purple monster.
Nice.
That was me. And Stephanie DeBruzzo was the little girl, and James Voightal was the little boy. And we did the prison song, yeah. And I've gotten to do all kinds of silly things. It was Jeff the Diseased Lung, who made an appearance a couple weeks ago. And I've been a moose getting a colonoscopy, a polar bear with a broken male organ. I've been a seagull. I've been a funky monkey. I got to animate the wax figure of a president for it was Garfield, and it was we shot this like a movie upstate New York at this country club, and had people like Laura Linney and Michael McKean, who were just great.
Oh my God, I love Michael McKean.
Yeah, I always describe John's show as Monty Python meets 60 Minutes.
That just sounds amazing. I looked it up on YouTube, and the first thing that popped up was the giant squirrel. So
and he will be back. So they won the lawsuit got dropped. So at some point, Mr. Nutterbutter will be back yet again.
So rumor has it that, I mean, have you ever thought of maybe doing your own show? I mean, you've been in puppeteering for 30 plus years. I mean, you seem to know what you're doing. I mean, are we ever going to have you directing and making your own show and bringing a show like Bear back?
Hopefully, because I've gotten like fan email from the moms and from the kids with autism and special needs who grew up with Bear, and they still watch the show with videotapes that they made, or even the DVDs, the few that were out there. And because it's still such a calming, influence and so gentle. And I realized there's no show like that on, and there's not going to be a show like that on anytime soon. So I've been trying to develop my own shows for autism and special needs kids called The Show Me Show. And I have a little channel on YouTube, The Show Me Show channel. And I've been wanting to develop that. So I'm going to be making some videos this summer. I'm going to be putting some more out there. And hopefully people will notice it, and maybe somebody, maybe at Netflix.
That'd be great.
I know
exactly.
exactly.
Like an original series,
Right?
Kids with autism and special needs. So yes, so that's what I'm trying to do, and I've got everything in place to do a full blown series. Just need the money. Everything's in place. Everything, the puppets, the writing, where to do it. I wanted to do it at the University of North Texas, where Peter Linz and I do our master class each year. We just finished doing it for the 6th year, called Beyond the Sock, and it's a master class in television and film puppetry with Pasha Romanowski, and you get to make your own puppet, and we teach you how to do the TV portion of manipulation. But I want to do it there because it's a full working studio, and on that site is the Kristen Farmer Autism Center, who have agreed to be, my sort of like consultants. And I've got everything in place. People I want to perform and everything. I just need the money. So we start out small, doing like, little things to give you an idea of what the big show would be like. And hopefully with enough exposure, it'll happen. So,
well, what can we do as people who really want this show to be a thing? I mean, do you have a Kickstarter? Do you have a GoFundMe? I mean,
which congressman do we write to?
I've done those in the past to get things started. Now I'm just, if you just go to to spread the word about my website, my YouTube channel, the Show Me Show channel, and just have people just tell people and tell people and tell people. I have a Twitter account called at Noel Your Host, which is for the Show Me Show. There's a Facebook page for the Show Me Show as well, and so just tell as many people as possible and spread the word. And it's nice to know that actually I've been to Comic-Cons and people have told me that they've heard about it, especially moms. Especially there's Facebook pages for parents with autistic and special needs kids. And a couple of them have told me that they've heard about it from those pages. So just more and more exposure would be awesome.
I have a friend who actually works at a home for special needs folks, so that's definitely something that I will pass along for sure.
Thanks, guys.
Are you kidding me? Yes.
So this all begs the question then: what did you think of Julia, the new character on the Muppet on Sesame Street?
Oh, it was great because last year I got to be this special sort of puppet guest for Gen Con. Gen Con is the oldest, one of the oldest conventions in terms of gaming. It's last year was its 50th anniversary, and it was celebrating gaming. And so there's a puppet track there, and I got to be the guest star. And Alyssa Honeycutt, who runs it, Alyssa is also Julia on Sesame Street, and so we had a panel, a discussion about autism and puppets, and the fact that people wanted to know, is like, is this in competition with what you're trying to do? And I said, no, it's absolutely not. It's like, my show is for pretty much any kid could watch it, but it's designed in terms of like the sincerity and the tone, and not too loud and in your face. It's designed for kids with autism and special needs. Mm-hmm. Julia is designed to expose kids and their parents to what an autistic person would be like if you met them in your own encounter in the world. So she's a way of the way like Sesame Street introduces the alphabet, or numbers, or the concept of cooperation. Julia is introducing you to the concept of somebody who is called autistic. And so it's two different things, but still doing its best to educate people about autism and make them more aware of autism and special needs.
And that's just terrific, because with Bear and Sesame Street, of course, back in the 60s, and Between the Lines, all just developed with such an understanding for children and what children really need, and especially with what you were talking about with Bear and how they wanted you to use your own voice, how just different things like that, the little things that really make the show what it is. It's really, really heartwarming to know that that there are people like that who understand and who still care. I mean, that was a good few years ago now that show started, but it's not. It feels like it's not like that anymore. But they're out there somewhere. But
there is it definitely is a market that needs to be filled. I mean, the world needs the Muppets. The world needs a good puppet show. For me, having grown up with Muppets Tonight and all of the Muppet movies, and the Wubulous World of Dr. Seuss and Between the Lions and all of those amazing shows, it's sad that they don't have stuff like that for kids anymore. I mean, and even growing up here in Chicago, I mean, we had Garfield Goose, and we had we had all of the Ray Rayner with Cuddly Dudley. I mean, puppets were and still a huge part of growing up as a kid, and it just creates so much for it builds the imagination, and it just is really sad that there really aren't that many good puppet shows. I mean, they just came out with this movie, that is created by the same people, I guess, that made the Muppets, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, not quite what we were looking for, but I mean, hey, we'll take it. I guess.
There's the market, So that's what I'm trying to do too, because the fact that right now the networks won't do it, but it's the kind of thing where if I get enough exposure and people are interested and have good feedback, then that would get the attention of one of the more of the networks, more like Netflix or Hulu or something like that.
Because Netflix, they do weird stuff. I'll tell you that they do weird stuff. They take chances. Not that your idea is weird. It's not at all.
Yeah, but they do. They would take a chance with it. So it would be nice. So so fingers crossed. And thanks for spreading the word and letting me blather on for all this time for my last 30 years.
Let me hit you with a parting question, Noel. Let me
sure.
Okay. So, Jim Henson had this great philosophy, this great quote. One of the great quotes of Jim Henson. He hoped to leave the world a little better for having been here. So let me pose this to you. What lessons would you like to impart on the world while you're a part of it? Like, what do you hope to kind of look back on and say, I've done something.
I would say it's like pretty much it's that last episode of Bear where Bear and Luna are talking about how, especially Luna says, how we affect each other each and every day, and it'd be nice if it could always be in a positive way, because that's the thing, you encounter so many people in your day-to-day that if you could just do like one simple little act of kindness, it just helps them. So just basically like what Jim was saying, just be nice to each other, and it's a good life. Enjoy it, and it really is. It really is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So just really be nice to each other and enjoy each other and really live in the moment. Don't worry so much about the future. It'll still be there. And don't keep living in the past. Don't keep rehashing stuff over and over again. Just enjoy what you have right now if you're able to. If you can do it with somebody else or just by yourself, and just be nice to each other. That's the main thing.
Man, that's the truth.
Are you crying? Really?
Baby.
But that really is it's
be nice to each other and don't cry. Really.
It's so beautiful. No.
Really, that is it's incredibly it's really great. Like I was saying before, it's really great to know that there's still people like you out there who want to make the world a better place for really great reasons, who want to help the people who need it, and be there for the children. And like with Bear, what he represents, and what the characters of Sesame Street represent, basically what your career represents, with your life story and everything. It's very, very special, very, very special.
Thanks so much, guys. This was really fun. Which reminds me of a song. Hey, this was really fun.
But now it's time.
So if you want to hit us with a few notes of goodbye, it would be kind of the perfect.
You don't have to. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
no, it's okay. I remember it's like goodbye, goodbye, good friends, goodbye, and tomorrow just like today, the moon, the bear, and the big blue house will be waiting for you to come and play, to come and play, to come and play. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody watching, and thank you, James and Mike, for joining me, and of course, with Noel, thank you for spending some time with us. We went a little over an hour, but
just a smidge,
Thank you to all our viewers out there who are tuning in right now. I will see you next time. Bye bye.
All right.
Bye now.